Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
We hope you've had a moment to look over the article from February 2021, linked in our last episode's description, as today, Michael and David try once again to bring the shadow campaign to light.
We talked about how reading this manifesto, and that's literally what it is.
Yes.
It's really how they wanted it read.
Yep.
I mean, they did. This is our manifesto. And by the way, the tone, not just from the Time magazine writer on how important it is for everybody to have read this article that if they did read and they're not talking about, it's also in the people that they interviewed, as if they needed you to know. They never say this, David, but it had the feeling of, we did a lot of things that you might perceive as wrong, but we did it for a really good reason, to save our democracy. Our democracy was at stake.
It's almost like if you ever catch up with us, right? Here's our note to explain what we really were doing, and we hope we don't catch up with us before the statute of limitations comes out on all this.
Isn't it important for us to start if we're going to have an understanding? Because I understand that people are listening. I understand that people listen to a lot of different things and watch a lot of different things, and now we've gotten to a point where nobody really believes or trusts anybody. So we just want you to read this for yourself and ask the same questions we're asking. But I'll tell you what struck me reading it 3 years later, that both sides believed the other side was conspiring, and that's what allowed this side to justify its confessed conspire. Did that strike you this time?
Well, it struck me the first time as well. And it shows you that people that are professionals in manipulating power, that's really what they do, and manipulating money, play for keeps. And they know how deadly the game is that's being played, how serious it is, and that most people have absolutely no idea what's going on behind the scenes in a national election, such as this one. And we could point to lots and lots of culprits, but there's one that we need to make real plain here. This is about power and money. It is about control.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about controlling the federal system, controlling the administrative state, controlling regulatory agencies, being in power, controlling the courts. The United States government is a very big deal. And as not only is it a big deal because of the budget, but the more that the administrative state grows, the more people have to protect themselves against that state. And so these people are simply buying access and buying control. So, and George Soros has been doing this from the outside. Zuckerberg's been doing it
Podesta's been doing it from the inside.
From the inside since the Clinton administration. So this is the game that's being played. So when Donald Trump was talking about the deep state, he had a clue, but he didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think Steve Bannon really understands what the deep state really is. It's very, very simple. It's so simple that it's actually hard to call evil, because it's just that simple.
And when Donald Trump talks about, they're coming after me now, but then they're going to come after you, I wish everyone could understand they already are coming after you. This confession in this Time magazine article makes it crystal clear from Mike Podhorzer. It wasn't about consent of the governed. It wasn't about a fair and accurate election result. It was about, at their rosiest picture, avoiding riots that were going to happen if Trump didn't win or did win. Either way, they had the outcome being riots, neither of which happened.
But the truth is, it was about saving America from Donald Trump.
Exactly. It was about making sure that no matter what happened, right, Donald Trump couldn't win.
And that's because they are absolutely convinced that they understand America better than what the Declaration says, what the Constitution says, what the state constitutions say, what the rule of law says. They're saving America from someone who's going to disrupt the order of the status quo. And the law doesn't matter anymore. They'll twist the law however they have to twist it.
Oh, absolutely.
They'll make bad trouble, good trouble. They'll label it however they want. They'll fight that fight, but they claim moral superiority.
It's a deeper mental illness than that, though. So they call it good trouble versus anarchy and insurrection because in their mind, it's necessary. So that's where their double standard comes from. Now, what does that mean? I want to break it down for you. If Donald Trump is elected by the people, whether you understand how he did it or not, and Donald Trump takes office, and Donald Trump's views become the narrative for the country or the agenda of the presidency, and therefore it takes over the narrative of the media as he's governing, that to them is insurrection. What does that mean? It means energy independence is insurrection. Energy independence is anarchy. So is low taxes. Do you understand? I mean, you got to understand this or you're going to miss the whole point of what's driving these people.
And it goes even deeper than that, because what it means is if they're not in control of the administrative state, the status quo will change. They'll all lose their jobs and they'll lose their control. And that's what they have to save America from. And that's why they're able to personalize it into Trump as the orange man, into Trump as the hated entity. And it would not matter. It would not matter if it was Donald Trump or anyone else of any other party.
Can't have the borders secured.
They're doing
Can't
the
have a
same
baby live.
thing to RFK Jr.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing to a Democrat with unassailable credentials from the Democrat community over history, because he's a threat. He's a threat to the status quo.
By the way, the article is very upfront in telling you that state laws were changed and millions voted by mail, that they strong-armed the media. By the way, I have bruises from that strong-arming. They strong-armed social media. This was all to control narrative and silence dissent.
Time out. You just said it. Now, we've got all these legal questions going on about Zuckerberg. And what about Zuckerberg's recent confession? Yes, the administration of Joe Biden has come to me and told me I have to change what I say. He said it out loud. This article says that this was being said by the shadow conspiracy during the campaign. They were working to change the outcome of a campaign by controlling and throttling social media, and they admit it out loud. Why isn't Jim Jordan called Molly Ball in front of his committee to tell the story? Wouldn't that be interesting?
As I said, you don't have to be the Lincoln lawyer to find your entire witness list in this one Time magazine article.
Another point on this. The reason it's important to read is because it now reads like an echo chamber of the Trump indictments coming out of Atlanta. And let's start with this one. This is astounding to me. In regards to the rule of law, the stuff that we go to bed at night and think to ourselves, well, the bad guys aren't going to win because the courts are still open. The laws are still on the books. There are people dedicated to making sure that the bad guys don't get away with it and that the good guys don't get left holding the bag. How in the world does a district attorney, now this is a district attorney. Did I say that enough times? A district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, is bringing an indictment against the former president of the United States and 18 co-conspirators, accusing these people in a RICO case of attempting to violate the legality of the Georgia state election as it regards federal offices. Help me get this now. This is a state district attorney. This is not a federal official. This is not a member of the Justice Department. This is starting out as a state proceeding regarding a federal election. And the accusation is, okay, right, you get this? My point is, who's the offended party? Why does the state of Georgia have any legal authority to go into a court,
standing is everything,
yes, convene a grand jury,
why you're bringing it up,
and then present these charges against these 18 co-conspirators on federal charges of attempting to violate the election process on federal elections? On federal elections.
By the way, but get to the point. And what are they accused of doing that was such a breach of the law?
And get to the point. Now, but my point is, what's the standing? How is this person even allowed to have the argument? Well, where's the offense on the federal election? Why, if this isn't the federal Justice Department doing it, why is there any such proceeding that has any level of any measure whatsoever? What are they going to do? Throw Donald Trump in the county jail at Fulton County? What are they going to do? Throw the former president in law? What are they going to be doing?
And of course, then the whole media conversation becomes, and I'm sure it's been a big conversation in people's social media. Will or will not, if President Trump goes on to win the presidency again, will he have the ability constitutionally to pardon himself from this state issue, which the Constitution is silent about? But they're already moving on and taking their cue in this. But yeah, there should be a remarkable awe just in why is a state, a district attorney of a county following these kinds of charges. And then what are these charges that are any different from the montage we could play you of the left? And I'm talking candidates for president and vice president as well, saying and doing the very same things that this DA with no standing is doing.
So let's just say that a DA, pick a county, any county, a state official, pick a county, any county, a county official takes Molly Ball's shadow campaign article, lists all the organizations, and then persuades this a grand jury to be seated and proclaims that because these people were in existence, that their election was somehow defrauded. Now, but wait, there's more, because they've got actions. They're coming back, and I can hear them screaming, right now out loud. I can hear them the whole way from Georgia. Yeah, but he did this and he did that and he did the other thing. Okay, now let's get this. Let's put the time frame back on this. The election happens. The Trump people, for whatever reason, and it's sad to admit this out loud because they should have known a whole lot better than this, but they got surprised. How in the world could they get surprised by what happened, by the results? They got a whole lot more votes than they got the time before, but they still lost because Biden got a whole lot more. How in the world could they have not been aware of all the things that were happening that were going to set this up and cause the result to happen? How could they not know that Stacey Abrams came up out of nowhere and suddenly had hundreds of millions of dollars in Fulton County, I might add, to be able to operate to change the outcome of an election? How could they not have known this was coming? Okay. Whatever the case, whatever their shock, whatever their surprise. All right. The point is this. The other guys were doing all the same kinds of things. We go back to the time frame that we were in. Molly Ball does not write her article until February.
Right.
Donald Trump loses the election in November. Doesn't the president of the United States, the candidate for federal office, and don't the people working for him, legally working, holding jobs, have the right to start asking questions in Georgia about what actually happened? Right now, they're being indicted for all kinds of stuff. Now, we don't know the depth of what they did, and no, they didn't have the right to break the law. But the very sense and tone of the indictment is because they dared to challenge the system in Georgia, it was a conspiracy. What was a conspiracy to do what? Find out what really happened? To find out if it was true? I mean, why didn't Molly Ball call him and tell him, hey, guys, let me tell you what we actually did. So you're never going to find what you're looking for there because it's all over here. They knew what they had done.
When you subscribe to 1850 Main Street, you're the first to find out what's happening next with new guests, publications, and events. And when you spread the word about 1850 Main Street, you're helping others find real answers to the real questions facing America right now. To learn more, visit 1850mainstreet.com. And please, tell a friend.
What we'll never know until somebody actually puts Molly Ball on the stand is that the article actually comes out originally February 4th, 2021 at 5:40 a.m., which is to say it was ready to be published on February 3rd. But we don't know. And when you read the story, you can see all the different people she talks to. It sounds like this is a story that might have been begun to be crafted maybe days after the election, weeks after the election. I mean, the assumption shouldn't be that Molly started writing this February 2nd. Can we admit that?
Whose notes were being kept all along?
Translation, for all we know, Mike Podhorzer and the AFL-CIO and the Chamber of Commerce and all the corporate bigwigs that are all helping her make this story of what they did are sharing with her in real time what they did to conspire to get an election outcome as Donald Trump's trying to find out what happened in his election outcome.
Exactly.
And one's in RICO charges and indicted, and the other, of course, is got bragging rights in Time magazine.
Yes, exactly. They're getting medals, okay? And so the point of this is is not really to say it's hypocritical. What it is it's incredibly human. I mean, and it's really messed up. It's really messed up, and it's actually worth reading again. So, because we all have to.
Can I throw out one other bombshell that I read this time with the experiential knowledge of 3 years later, and it jumped out at me differently. When Molly explains from the people who approached her and what they shared with her, that she's going to give you a unique view of the inner workings, the documents, and interview the key players of a shadow campaign to save the democracy, which another way of saying a shadow campaign to predetermine an outcome of an election. With inner workings, documents, and interviews. I mean, that implies this story was being crafted over weeks, if not months.
Had to be, Michael.
It just appeared in February. So, double standard, right in, plain sight. I guess that's probably a point of conversation, right? That somehow you get away with this stuff when it's in plain sight.
So, and it really plays into what now is going to happen. It's just odd because it appears that all these 4 levels of indictments. Remember, we've got indictments on the business practices in New York of the Trump Corporation that involves the former president. We've got indictments now in Georgia on state RICO charges by a county district attorney. I'm telling you. Okay. And we've got that whole game going on. And you've got Mar-a-Lago and the documents. And so you've got all these different, and you've got the January 6th proceedings in Washington. So you got all this stuff going on. It is crystal clear that the coming election is going to be what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be indictments versus indictments.
Indictment versus indictments.
Maybe.
And one's looks worse than the other.
Now, Time Magazine put out this expose, like this confessional, and I don't know, it just seemed like the world just sort of went yawn. It was way too long an article. We told them it would be too long an article. That's like the Atlantic Monthly's great technique. Write the article so long that no one can finish it, so you wear out your opposition.
Or just do it all in plain sight. And if anybody quotes it or tries to speak it or expose it, they're going to look like a crazy conspiracy theorist. Just by association.
I only wish that every American could read this article. Just take the time to read the article and understand what they've admitted they were doing, and then just ask yourself, if that was you, if it was your administration, and you didn't read Molly Ball's article because she didn't release it until February 4th, and you were in November, wouldn't you feel you had the responsibility before you left office in January to try to find out what actually happened? Would you not make any phone calls? Would you? Now you say, well, you're just trying to defend Donald Trump. No, look, if there are laws that were broken and these indictments prove that those laws were broken, then justice must be served. It doesn't matter. The law is the law. We get it. But is the law when one group of people is telling you how egregiously they were conspiring for the outcome of a changed election, using the laws in every way they possibly could, and the other guy gets thrown in jail in Fulton County? The president of the United States goes to jail in Fulton County because he had the courage to ask the question and say, I'm not buying this.
There's a scene in JFK. It's a movie I don't really endorse, even though there were some great performances in an all-star cast. John Candy, Jack Lemmon. It was a who's who of stars. But basically, what Oliver Stone did in JFK was just take every conspiracy theory known to man and make a meatball out of it. Well, it makes a great movie, but it's not great science. It's not great fact.
It's not great history.
It's not great history. One of the things, and I felt like 3 years later, as I was rereading Molly's story in Time Magazine, I felt a lot like Kevin Costner's character. The more when they were all sitting around the table, they got into this, and you just get more and more concerned because it calls so many other things into question. It's so orchestrated that if it is as orchestrated as they brag, and if as they brag they did, it takes you from what to why, and what's disturbing, why is disturbing. It calls into question, was COVID real or COVID necessary to carry out the changing of laws and not going through state legislatures in order to do that? Because that's where your tens of millions of votes came from that they didn't see coming. Now, to a point you made earlier, I agree with you. The Republicans have always been terrible about addressing early voting. They like to vote on election day. That's just something they pride themselves on. Donald Trump knew that the left strategy was early voting, and he never met them on the battlefield there. You never heard one Republican leader telling people to register and vote early. That's all you heard from the left. And then when it came to changing the laws and mail-in votes, well, they were clearly doing that better than the Republicans. But they can't change the laws without COVID. So it makes you wonder, COVID's a conversation in and of itself about control. Was COVID a precursor of control, or did they just on the fly take advantage of COVID and strategize better? I mean, when you read this article, Mike Podhorzer basically tells you, I'm sitting here and I get politics and it's not that complicated, and don't let anybody make it complicated for you. It's about power and it's about perception and taking control of narratives and silencing opposition. And I'm sitting 2 years out, and I can tell you Donald Trump's going to get reelected. Yeah, because America was great again. But he goes, here's what I'm going to do to keep that from happening. And then he brags. Again, as I mentioned, the inner workings, the documents, all the players that were involved, and they orchestrate this. And I keep coming back 3 years later, whereas 3 years ago I was focused on the what. This time I'm more fascinated in the why. And I don't have answers, and I don't need to have answers. In fact, questions are always as important as answers, because you don't get the right answers till you answer the right questions. And my questions are their paranoia that Trump wouldn't leave if he won. And if he won, there would be a revolutionary, anarchist, chaotic violence in the street. This was all what justified everything they did that I think any grand jury would find legal challenges with.
So here's my question. I dragged you back into reading a lengthy article again 3 years later.
I'm glad you did.
Was it worth it?
Oh, absolutely.
It'd be worth anybody reading, right?
Absolutely, because it's going to show you why they did what they did, exactly what they did. And if Donald Trump's running again, they're going to do it again. So if you didn't read it 3 years ago, you can't understand what happened, and you certainly can't anticipate what's about to happen in a year and 2 months.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.